Oh, Jesus, you scared the crap out of me. The second Dreamcast birthday is coming up in about 2 weeks, and today I decided to do a documentary on it because, you know, it's August 13th, and I decided to do a documentary on this fabulous console that was released in 1999 on September 9th. Who am I, you may ask? My name is Paul Anderson, aka Smash Killer Gaming, and I'm playing retro games since I was 13. Been playing Smash Bros. Since I was 5 years old, and started playing professionally this year. And I'm playing video games in general since I was at least 2.5, 3 years old. And my GameCube was my first console. Now, let's take a deep dive history, or a deep dive look, into the world of the Sega Dreamcast, Sega's last home console, and a console that was ahead of its time. Our story begins with the Sega Saturn. After multiple attempts of keeping the Genesis alive with the Sega 32X and the Sega CD, Sega decided to launch a 32-bit console, which was released on November 1994 in Japan. Now, in Japan, the Sega Saturn was the most popular thing before the PlayStation came out. However, in North America, there was a lot of challenges when it came to the Sega Saturn. Like, for instance, the release date. At E3 of 1995, the Sega Saturn was announced and released on the same day as E3 at a $399 price point, which pissed off a lot of retailers because they were getting ready for the December 1995 release of the Sega Saturn. However, Sony had their press conference at E3 and said one price point that killed the Saturn.
$299.
After the Saturn's release on May 11th of 1995, a lot of retailers were so PO'd, especially the developers, that they decided not to make games for the Saturn, and they decided not to sell them at their stores. Now, those stores include Toys R Us, KB Toys, Target, Walmart, etc. And around that time, Sega was losing a lot of money by doing that. Now, Sega was in third place, and they were losing badly. And you're not going to like how much money they lost around this time. After Tom Kalinske quit, Bertie Stoller took his place and said, Saturn is not our future. So the Saturn was discontinued in 1998, which caused Sega to lose $269.9 million and lay off 30% of its workforce. At the time, there was no really console at all for the last 2 or 3 months around that time. And since Sega was a very hardware-specific company, that was a very big problem. However, the Japanese and American division of Sega decided to do a contest to see which console they will use for the 6th generation of consoles. Well, their entry to be precise. And you could already tell which one they used, since Sega's a Japanese company. And there was a lot of problems when it came to that. In 1997, Sega began work on a brand new console after the Sega Saturn's demise. Due to the popularity in PC gaming, Sega confronted NEC for their Power VR chip and 3DFX for their Voodoo chips for their consoles. Codenamed Black Belt and White Belt, supposed to be a Sega Saturn 2. However, Sega went with the White Belt because of the Power VR chip inside of it. However, 3DFX sued Sega for $100 million due to breach of contract. 3DFX lost, and the lawsuit defunct their company. After Sega picked the White Belt and 3DFX now defunct due to that lawsuit, Sega began work on the Dreamcast. And it was first codenamed White Belt, now it's codenamed Katana, which would later become the Dreamcast. Now, a year later, and Sega gets a huge promotion. Watch this trailer. On May 21st, 1998, Sega revealed the Sega Dreamcast to the public in a press conference. And there's a lot of hype within the Dreamcast and the Sega name. Also worth mentioning, at E3 in 1998, Sega released this trailer to the public with the release date coded 9/9/1999, which is the American release date. However, before we get into all that, let's talk about the release date in Japan. On November 27th of 1998, the Dreamcast was made reality to the Japanese gaming public. However, due to NEC graphic shortages, people left the stores empty-handed, and there were not enough for a full launch. More than a year away of the Sega Dreamcast North American release, Bertie Stoller took notice of what happened to the Japanese game partners and made a plan so their release won't fumble or flop. Stoller did a lot of things to push the Sega Dreamcast name, including making commercials that were basically made by PDI, which would later become DreamWorks and owned by Nickelodeon and Sony. Now, there was an unexpected turn at Sega of America, and you guys are going to want to hear this because you probably already know what's gonna happen. Bernie Stolar was fired from Sega and was replaced with Peter Moore. Yes, the guy who basically invented the Xbox 360. Little did you know, the Xbox 360 was basically made due to Peter Moore's experience with the Dreamcast. And the day after Bernie Stolar's firing, Sega released the Sega Dreamcast on 9/9/1999 for $199. Let's take a closer look at the Sega Dreamcast itself. Gaming historian?
The system itself is quite small, with two simple buttons on the top: Power, which turns the system on, and Open, which opens up the CD drive. The front of the Dreamcast has 4 controller ports. This is pretty awesome. Now back then, wireless controllers were not the norm like they are today. If a console had 4 controller ports, there was no need to buy any extra adapters to play certain multiplayer games. The back of the Dreamcast has a serial port, an audio-video port, a line-in for online connectivity, and an AC in plug. This may not seem like a big deal, but this power plug is really nice. Why? Because it's not proprietary. You see, some consoles have power adapters that require certain voltage or a certain plug. If for some reason you lost or broke your power cord for the Dreamcast, finding a replacement would be extremely easy. The controller is also pretty cool. It has 2 trigger buttons on the back, a D-pad, an analog stick, and 4 buttons on the right. It has a start button in the center, but lacks a select button. The memory card for the Dreamcast had a small LCD screen and even a D-pad with A and B buttons. This is because some games offered mini-games that could be put on the memory card. It was plugged into the controller, and during gameplay, custom animations from the game would be displayed on the screen. You could also connect 2 cards together through the ports on the top and exchange game data. Several other peripherals such as the fishing rod, the keyboard and mouse, and a microphone were also released.
Thank you, gaming historian, for that wonderful input about the Sega Dreamcast hardware and software capabilities, along with the internet capabilities, and so forth and so on. Now, Sega has been having a successful launch around this time frame, and retailers have been calling them and asking them, we're out of stock, we have to have more hardware. People are banging down our doors for a Sega Dreamcast. And beforehand, Sega could actually keep up before the PS2's release. Now, a year later, the PS2 releases, and Sega loses Japan. On March 4th of 2000, the PS2 was released in Japan, and store kiosks were showing the DVD capabilities of the PS2, which boomed the DVD market in Japan since DVDs weren't being sold out there. And because of that boom, Sony pulled in $250 million in its first day of selling the PS2, which beats the Dreamcast pulling in $97 million on the first day of its release. As time went on, the PS2 was outselling the Dreamcast, Sega was suffering, and they literally needed to find a way to actually get more Sega Dreamcast sales to where they can stay in the game for a longevity of time. Now, in the holiday of 2000, Sega catches a break. But that break doesn't last long. Sony announced that they could only ship half a PS2 that they originally planned for the holiday season. Sega lowered the price, they did giveaways and all that type of stuff. They even did an online service in order to where you can get a free Dreamcast. They pushed. But at the end of the holidays, it never actually made headway. And on March 31st of 2001, the Sega Dreamcast was discontinued. The last game published for it was Sonic Adventure 2. Now, there were 3 reasons why the Sega Dreamcast failed. Number 1 was the PS2. The PS2 literally outsold the Dreamcast. It had DVD capabilities, which boomed the Japanese DVD market in Japan and had more graphical capabilities than the Dreamcast did. Number 2, third-party support was lacking on the Dreamcast. When Dreamcast released, there was a lot more first-party subtitles than third-party titles, and that was a bad thing. And the reason why there was less third-party titles was because of the fact that the Saturn literally released early. That way, developers didn't have time to develop any third-party titles for the system. So that's why Sega lost third-party support for the Sega Dreamcast. And number 3, and this is the big one, piracy. Because the Sega Dreamcast can play pirated games, the FTC issued a statement to Sega stating, if you do not discontinue this console, we will fine you and shut you down. And that's exactly what happened. The Federal Trade Commission made it to where the Sega Dreamcast could not be selling any more systems again. And that is why Sega is now a third-party support company, and now they only make games for their competitors. They still do hardware, but they don't do hardware like they used to. They only do like arcade stuff and retro mini consoles, and that's it.